The morning it all started, the sunlight was cutting across my driveway in long white stripes, the kind that made the frost glitter like crushed diamonds, and I stepped outside with my coffee in one hand and my tool bag in the other, thinking about nothing more complicated than tightening the loose hinge on my garage door. I had barely reached the edge of my driveway when I saw something that made me stop mid-step. Three bright orange construction sawhorses lined up across my driveway like a blockade, connected by a thick yellow chain stretched tight across the entrance. And standing beside the barricade, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the crisp morning air, was Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, breathing heavily like he had just run a marathon even though all he had done was stand still. His cheeks were flushed bright crimson, his forehead slick with beads of sweat that glistened in the sunlight, and as soon as he saw me he puffed out his chest so far his shirt buttons protested loudly. "Good morning," he barked, though his voice cracked halfway through the greeting. What a beautiful day for community improvements." I stared at the barricade, then at him, then at the barricade again. "Mark," I said, setting my coffee on the hood of my truck, "why is there a construction barrier across my driveway?" His chest heaved. "ITS not a barrier," he yelled, sweating even harder. "It's ITS a driveway flow regulation device." I blinked slowly. "A what? A flow regulation device?" he repeated, voice rising like he thought saying it louder would make it real. I stepped closer. "Mark, it's a chain and some sawhorses." His face reddened even more. "It is HOA equipment and you will respect HOA equipment," he shouted, a drop of sweat flinging off his chin and landing near my boot. Two men I hadn't noticed before, HOA volunteers, both wearing reflective vests and holding clipboards, hovered awkwardly behind him, clearly reconsidering their life choices. I crossed my arms. "Why is this here?" "Because," he said, pausing dramatically, "you have been using your driveway incorrectly." I stared. "Incorrectly?" He nodded vigorously, his belly bouncing. "Yes, incorrectly, in a way that causes traffic disturbance." "Mark," I said, "I live on a dead-end street." One of the volunteers whispered, "There's never any traffic here." Mark spun around so fast sweat sprayed from his neckline. "Silence, you are observers only." Then he turned back to me. "Starting today, the HOA is implementing an updated vehicle movement guideline system." "Which means?" I asked. His face lit up, not with excitement but with the manic triumph of someone who had stayed up all night inventing nonsense rules. "Which means," he said dramatically, "you must request permission to enter and exit your driveway." I blinked again. "Permission to use my own driveway?" "Yes," he shouted, slapping his sweaty palm against his pink shirt, leaving a dark wet print that spread rapidly. "For safety reasons." "Whose safety?" I asked. "THE communities." He roared, even though there wasn't a single person within 50 feet of us besides the three of them. "And I have decided, THAT, until further notice, your driveway is ON restricted access hold." "Meaning I can't leave?" "Meaning," he corrected, "you must follow HOA traffic coordination protocols." "Mark," I said slowly, "what does the protocol say?" "The protocol," he declared proudly, wiping more sweat off his forehead, "says you must wait for HOA supervision to move your vehicle." I took a deep breath. "And who supervises?" His face lit up with a sickeningly smug grin. "I do," he announced triumphantly, sweat dripping down the side of his face. "AS HOA traffic commander." "Traffic commander?" "Yes, a role I created this morning," he shrieked, chest heaving. "And you will respect it." I stared him dead in the eyes. "Mark." "Move the sawhorses." His entire body jerked. "No, move the chain." "No," he yelled louder, voice cracking. "I will not. This is official HOA business." "Mark, I need to leave." "No," he snapped, sweat dripping onto the chain itself. "You will remain until you receive clearance." I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, resisting every urge to lose my temper. When I opened them again, I said calmly, "Mark, if you don't remove this, I'm calling the sheriff." Eyes went so wide they almost doubled in size. "You can't call the sheriff on an HOA order." "Watch me," I replied. His voice jumped an octave. You dare." But he must have seen the determination in my face because he suddenly turned desperate. I haven't finished the protocol yet." "You made it up this morning," I reminded him. "Yes, but it is in draft," he yelled, grabbing his clipboard and flipping through empty pages as sweat dripped onto the paper. I took out my phone. "I'm calling." "Stop," he screamed. "Stop right there." And then he said the words that would ruin his entire day. "If you call the sheriff, I'll make sure everyone in the neighborhood knows you are a problematic resident." I placed my thumb over the call button. "Or," I said, "I could call someone else instead." He blinked. "Who?" "The news." His entire body froze, the sweating stopped mid-drip, the crisp winter air held still around us. "The news?" he whispered, horrified. "You would." "Try me," I said. "Move the barricade." He shook his head violently. "No, you can't. The news will make us look bad." I nodded. "Exactly." And that was the moment I knew this story would go somewhere he never expected, because calling the sheriff was one thing, but calling the news, that was nuclear, and I was done playing games. The moment the word news left my mouth, the entire street seemed to freeze in the cold daylight, like even the sunlight itself hesitated before hitting the pavement. The winter air felt sharper, more alert, as if the whole neighborhood instinctively knew that something irreversible had just been said. The two HOA volunteers exchanged looks of sheer panic, clutching their clipboards like shields, but the worst reaction came from Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, whose entire face drained of color before instantly flushing back into a deep tomato-like red. Sweat rate doubled on the spot, thick beads forming on his forehead, rolling down his cheeks and dripping down the front of his stretched pink shirt, soaking the fabric until it clung to his huge belly like wet plastic wrap. He shook his head so wildly that droplets of sweat sprayed into the sunlight like tiny prisms. "You can't call the news," he shrieked, voice cracking, jowls trembling violently. You can't let them see this." I folded my arms. "Move the barricade, Mark." "No." He roared, "The public cannot know about HOA traffic management infrastructure failure." "Traffic infrastructure?" I repeated. He pointed dramatically at the chain. "Yes, this is a public safety device. It's a chain from Home Depot," I said, his nostrils flared. "It is a modular vehicle flow prevention system." I took out my phone again, thumb hovering over the camera app. The volunteers backed away slowly like they expected him to explode. "Don't record this." Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, pleated, stepping toward me with sweat dripping off his chin. "CAMURAS make things permanent. That's what I'm counting on," I said calmly. He let out a wheezing gasp. You want to publicly humiliate the HOA?" I shrugged. "No, just you." The man nearly fainted. His enormous belly wobbled as he stumbled backward and grabbed one of the sawhorses for support. The flimsy thing bent under his weight. "Listen," he yelled, flapping his hands frantically. We can negotiate, we can discuss, we can form a subcommittee, we can move the barricade." "No," he shrieked again, "because if I move it, you'll think you can challenge HOA authority anytime you want." "That's already what I think," I said. One of the volunteers coughed softly. Another muttered, "Just move it, man." Mark spun around with such speed sweat flew from his collar. "I will not. This is a matter of principle." "Whose principle?" I asked. "Mine," he bellowed. "My principle is the HOA principle." That sentence lingered in the cold air like the ghost of a failed leadership program. I exhaled. "All right then." And I began dialing. Mark went ballistic. "Stop, stop, put the phone down." He lunged toward me, lunged in the sense that his upper body moved forward dramatically and the rest of him waddled to catch up. His belly bounced violently, his pink shirt stretched to its limit, and his black dress pants creaked audibly. "Are you calling the news?" he screamed. "Are you really going to do this?" The line began ringing. Sweat poured down his face in thick rivers. His hands shook uncontrollably. You can't." But then something happened that he hadn't expected. A loud car door slammed down the street. All heads turned. My neighbor Jim, ex-Marine, buzz cut, always calm, stepped out of his pickup, folding his arms as he watched the scene unfold. A moment later, another male neighbor emerged, and another, and another. They stood along the edges of their driveways, all men, all quiet, arms folded, watching. Silent judgment radiated from every porch. And Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, finally noticed them. His eyes bulged. He stammered. Why are they here? Looks like the neighborhood's interested," I said. "They saw your barricade." "They're not supposed to see the barricade," he shrieked. They're supposed to respect it." "They think it's stupid," Jim said flatly. Mark spun toward him. "Respect your HOA president," Jim shrugged. "You're sweating on his driveway, Mark." That sent Mark spiraling again. Sweat dripped onto the chain, hissing as it hit the frost. This can't be happening," he said, voice cracking. I authorize an audience." "It's a neighborhood," I said, "not your kingdom. It is a community monarchy." "I don't think you want to say that on camera," I replied, pointing to my phone. That was the final straw. "Fine." He screamed, grabbing the chain with trembling hands. "If you want to leave us so badly, you," and before anyone understood what he was doing, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, dragged another sawhorse from behind a shrub and slammed it down beside the others, reinforcing the blockade. "THATS it," he shrieked. "Your driveway is closed until further notice." Silence fell, then Jim said, "Call the news." I hit the dial button and Mark let out a scream so loud it startled birds from the trees. "No." The phone rang twice, then a voice answered. "Channel 7 local desk, how can we help?" And Mark collapsed to his knees because he knew this wasn't just an HOA problem anymore. He had walked straight into his own public disaster. The moment the news desk operator on the other end of the line said, "Channel 7 local desk, how can we help?" the entire neighborhood seemed to inhale at once, as if everyone instinctively understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. I kept my phone raised, thumb resting just above the speaker, while Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, dropped both hands onto the frosty asphalt and stared up at me with a face so red and drenched with sweat that he resembled a melting traffic cone. No, wait," he pleaded, voice cracking like ice. You don't have to do this. We can negotiate. We can reevaluate the flow regulation guidelines. But before he could finish, the news operator continued, Sir, hello, are you reporting an incident? And that sent Mark scrambling, literally scrambling across the pavement like a man trying to physically intercept the sound waves coming out of my phone. His pink shirt rode up halfway over his enormous belly as he reached for my arm with both sweaty hands. Stop it, stop that call right now, he screeched. The two volunteers watched in stunned horror, clipboards pressed to their chests like riot shields. I stepped back calmly. Yes, I said into the phone. There's a homeowner association attempting to block a resident from using his own driveway with unauthorized barricades. A gasp rippled across the circle of male neighbors who had gathered along the curbs, their breath puffing out in white clouds in the cold air. Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, let out a guttural groan, half animal and half political meltdown. "No," he yelled. "This is a miscommunication, a misinterpretation, a miscontext. The word didn't even exist, but Mark was far beyond the realm of coherent vocabulary. His entire face glistened with sweat, the collar of his shirt soaked through, the fabric stretched so tightly across his chest and belly that the seams visibly strained as he breathed. The news operator asked, Is the HOA president present right now? And in the most tragic way possible, Mark tried to appear authoritative. He stood up too quickly, slipped, caught himself on the sawhorse, adjusted his pink shirt, wiped sweat from his forehead, and then puffed out his chest while panting like a steam engine. Yes, he barked toward the phone, hands shaking. This is the HOA president, the legitimate president, and I demand you cease this call immediately. The operator replied flatly, Sir, we don't take orders from HOA members. The crowd burst into muffled laughter. Mark froze like a deer caught in headlights, his sweaty face twisting into a horrified grimace. You mock me? He yelled at the phone, as if the operator could see him melting in real time. You mock the HOA. Jim, my ex-Marine neighbor, spoke up from behind him. They're mocking you, Mark, not the HOA. Mark spun around so fast his belly continued rotating half a second after the rest of him. Stay out of this, James, he shrieked. This is an internal matter. It's on speakerphone, Jim said, so it's not internal anymore. Mark let out another high-pitched scream, stumbling backward until his heel caught on the chain barricade and he fell onto his backside with a wet slap, his pink shirt flattening against his belly like a suction cup. SIR, the news operator said. Would you like us to dispatch a crew? Mark's eyes widened in terror. No crew, no cameras, no reporting. But I looked calmly at my phone and said the one sentence that changed everything. Yes, send a team. Mark's entire body convulsed as if struck by lightning. WHYYYYYYYYY, he wailed into the sky, his voice echoing off the quiet houses. Why would you do that? I pocketed my phone. Because you made this impossible to handle quietly. No, he screamed, pounding the ground with his fists. No, you've ruined everything. This was supposed to be a private eviction, I mean private driveway flow regulation procedure. The slip-up wasn't lost on the crowd. Murmurs spread instantly. Eviction? Someone whispered. Did he say eviction? Another asked. Mark scrambled to his feet, wobbling, sliding, gasping for air as he waved his arms frantically. No, MIS spoken, I meant an adjustment of vehicle rights, that's all, nothing else. But it was too late, the damage was done, more neighbors stepped outside, a few men across the street pulled out their phones. One of them muttered, if the news is coming, I'm getting this on video too. Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, turned toward them with trembling fury. No recording, he screamed, pointing at each one individually. No recording in my face, no recording in my shirt, no recording my... He stopped mid-sentence when he noticed the sweat-soaked state of his shirt clinging to every curve and crease of his body. He tried tugging the fabric away from his belly, but it snapped right back, suctioning itself as if welded. The volunteers looked at him with pity. Should we remove the barricade? One of them asked timidly. Mark whirled around. No, nobody touch anything, he screamed. The only way we lose is if we retreat. Mark, I said, you lost the moment you blocked someone's driveway. No, he shouted, stomping his foot so hard snow fell off the nearby hedge. I can still salvage this. Jim asked. Mark opened his mouth dramatically and then realized he had no answer. He stood there blinking, sweating, mouth open but empty. Then he whispered, I need to think. You should have done that before blocking a driveway, I said. Mark looked as though I'd stabbed him. Then standing there, soaked in sweat, pink shirt plastered to his belly, chest heaving, he whispered one of the most unhinged things I'd ever heard. Maybe if I barricade more driveways. The news won't know which incident to focus on. The entire neighborhood fell silent. Jim looked at me, I looked at him, we both looked at Mark. Then I said, Mark, that's exactly the kind of idea that gets people fired on TV. And that was when the sound of a distant engine echoed from the main road. A heavy van, a familiar type, a news van. And as it approached, Mark made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a squeal, because the disaster he feared most was officially rolling into sight. The news van turned the corner with its logo gleaming in the bright winter sunlight. the kind of sharp midday light that made every surface reflect just a little too clearly. And as the white and blue vehicle rolled slowly toward my driveway, every neighbor on the block instinctively stepped closer to watch the unfolding spectacle. The cold air carried the soft hum of the van's engine, and even the frost on the lawn seemed to brighten in anticipation, but no reaction was louder, physically or emotionally, than that of Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, who staggered backward as though the sight of the news crew physically struck him. His massive belly jiggled with the impact, his sweat-soaked pink shirt clung tighter to him with every frantic breath, and his arms flailed wildly as he shook his head in disbelief. "No, no, no," he screamed, voice cracking into a desperate, shrill pitch that echoed against garage doors up and down the street. "The media cannot be here. This is a private community incident." The news van slowed to a stop right in front of my driveway, just inches from the barricade Mark had refused to move, and the sliding side door opened with a soft mechanical hiss. A male reporter stepped out first, tall, clean-shaven, wearing a thick winter coat and holding a microphone with the station's logo. Behind him climbed out the cameraman, a bulky guy with gloves and a professional 4K rig balanced on his shoulder. The moment the lens pointed even slightly in Mark's direction, he let out a strangled, panicked squeal, covering his face with both hands, which only smeared more sweat across his forehead. "Stop, turn that off, turn it off." Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, shouted while staggering side to side like a panicked cartoon character come to life. The cameraman didn't even blink. He adjusted his focus and started filming. "Sir," the reporter said calmly, "we received a call about a homeowner being blocked from accessing his own driveway by the Homeowner Association. We're here to get the facts." Mark gasped dramatically. Fake news," he shouted, even though he'd watched them arrive in real time. "This is all exaggerated, all misrepresented, all misquoted." "No one has quoted you yet," the reporter said, eyebrows raised. Mark stomped both feet like a toddler denied dessert. Well, don't." Meanwhile, several more men from around the neighborhood came out of their garages and porches, gathering near the street. One of them whispered, "Finally, something interesting around here." Another said, "Told you this HOA was out of control." I stepped forward just as the reporter approached me with a steady, professional expression. "You're the homeowner?" he asked. "Yes. And this driveway is being intentionally blocked by the HOA." "Correct," I said, "for reasons even they can't explain without inventing new vocabulary." Behind us, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, shrieked, "Don't listen to him. His driveway is a threat to community safety." The reporter turned to him. "Sir, could you explain how a driveway, unused and unobstructed, poses a safety threat?" Mark froze like a glitching robot, eyes darting everywhere, sweat dripping onto the icy pavement. Too much vehicle activity. He hasn't moved his truck all morning," I said. "Overcapacity," Mark shouted at me. "Your truck creates vehicle tension," the reporter blinked slowly. "Vehicle tension?" "Yes," Mark yelled, relieved to have landed on a phrase. "Excessive vehicle tension levels." At that moment, Jim and two other neighbors audibly snorted. One muttered, "This guy's lost it." The cameraman zoomed in a little closer on Mark, who panicked again, stumbling backward until he hit the barricade with his backside and nearly toppled the whole structure. "Stop filming me, stop, he cried, waving his arms wildly. "You have no permission to use my face. It's a public street," the reporter reminded him. "And you're the one who created the scene." Mark let out a choked sob of frustration. His shirt, already soaked, began sticking so tightly to him that every roll, fold, and crease of his stomach was visible in perfect detail. Steam rose from his shoulders in the freezing air, making him look like an overheated engine about to blow. Then the reporter asked the question that detonated the entire situation. "Sir, did you block this driveway as a punitive action?" Mark instantly held up a finger, dramatically like a courtroom lawyer, then immediately lost steam and wilted. No, yes, no, it's a temporary traffic emergency stabilization initiative." "Meaning," the reporter pressed. Mark blinked rapidly. "Meaning, proceedings are in motion." "Are you saying you invented this rule overnight?" Mark gulped so hard it was visible from across the street. "The HOA is ALLOWDTO improvise." "That doesn't sound legal," the reporter said. Well, we have bylaws." "Can we see them?" Mark froze again. "No, private." "Are they written down?" the reporter asked gently. Mark looked like a trapped animal. "THEY are verbally discussed." The cameraman zoomed even closer. Mark screamed into his hands, sweat spraying everywhere. Meanwhile, I walked toward the barricade. "Since the news is here," I said, "I'm going to ask one more time, remove this." "No." Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, howled, "The HOA will not bow to public pressure." "Then say that again," the reporter said, raising his mic, "but look into the camera when you do it." Mark turned toward the lens and wilted. His voice shrank to a squeak. "And no, then move it," I said. Mark grabbed the sawhorse with both sweaty hands, chest heaving so violently his shirt rippled, and shouted, "Fine, but this isn't over." He flung the barricade aside with a dramatic flourish, then slipped in his own melted sweat patch and fell flat on his stomach, arms spread, pink shirt billowing like a parachute. The camera caught every second in perfect clarity, and the neighborhood erupted into gasps. The news crew had their headline. Mark had his meltdown. And the day wasn't finished with him yet. When Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, hit the ground face first after slipping in the puddle of his own sweat. The sound was so loud it echoed off the garage doors up and down the block. The cameraman didn't even flinch. He simply leaned in, zooming tight on Mark's flailing limbs as steam rose from his overheated back and the snow beneath him melted into a wet crater. The neighborhood erupted into gasps, whispers, and a few stifled laughs as the reporter took a graceful step toward us. His mic raised, eyebrows high, clearly realizing he had just captured the most dramatic moment of the day. Mark peeled his face off the pavement with a sucking sound, blinking rapidly, sweat dripping from his eyebrows, forming tiny rivers down his already soaked cheeks. "Delete that footage," he wailed, but his voice cracked so badly it sounded more like a dying kettle than a command. "Delete it now." He pushed himself up, his massive belly dragging across the frost as he struggled to his knees, shirt plastered to him like wet tissue paper. He turned toward the reporter, arms trembling. As HOA president, you are legally required to cooperate." The reporter didn't even look at him. He simply turned toward me. "Sir, we'd like your comment first." I nodded, stepping forward as Mark clawed at the pavement behind me, wheezing like a malfunctioning vacuum cleaner. "Sure," I said. "The HOA president," Mark squealed when I said the word, "placed unauthorized barricades across my driveway, attempted to restrict me from using my own property, and refused multiple direct requests to remove them." The reporter nodded. "And did he give you a reason?" Behind me, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, sputtered, "Yes. I had a reason, a good reason." The reporter aimed the mic at him. "And that reason is," Mark puffed out his chest, sweat dripping onto his already soaked shirt. "Vehicle tension," the reporter blinked. "Vehicle tension, yes," Mark insisted desperately. "There was too much driveway activity. His truck hasn't moved in days," Jim muttered. The cameraman caught that too. Mark spun toward him. "Stop talking during official HOA," he slipped again, just a little but enough for the crowd to gasp. The reporter turned back to me. "What did you do next?" "I warned him I'd call the news," I said. "He refused to budge, so I called." Mark slapped both palms to his cheeks, smearing sweat like sunscreen. You ruined my reputation." "You ruined your reputation," I corrected. "I just made sure there were witnesses." The reporter nodded, summarizing aloud. "So the HOA attempted to forcibly control your driveway without legal grounds, misused enforcement authority, and reacted aggressively when confronted." Before I could respond, Mark shrieked, "That is a lie, a distortion, a miscreated misrepresentation." But the reporter ignored him again. "Sir," he asked me calmly, "is this the first time you've had issues with the HOA?" "Not the first," I said, "but definitely the worst." At that exact moment, another car rolled onto the street, a dark county sedan followed by a police cruiser. The crowd fell silent. Mark froze completely like a sweating pink statue. The county inspector from earlier that month stepped out of the sedan, adjusting his coat. The officer stepped out of his cruiser, nodding politely to the reporter before looking at me. "We got a flood of calls about a barricaded driveway," the inspector said, "and one about disorderly conduct from the HOA." Mark squealed like a frightened piglet. It was not disorderly, it was community management." The officer pulled out a notebook. "Sir, did you place these barricades?" Mark swallowed hard, his belly rising and falling like a malfunctioning bellows. Sweat poured off him like a broken faucet. Automatically, sir," the officer said firmly. "Step away from the barricade." Mark took one tiny backward step, slipped again, and crashed to his knees, arms flailing. The neighbors winced in unison. The county inspector approached the sawhorses. "These are not approved safety devices. They violate city code." Mark shook violently. But the HOA approved them." "Who in the HOA approved them?" "Me," Mark screamed. "Just me. I approved them myself at 6 a.m. That apparently was the nail in his coffin. The county inspector closed his folder. "Mr. Rudd," Mark whimpered at the sound of his last name, "you have exceeded your authority, again." The cameraman zoomed in, the reporter lifted his mic, the entire neighborhood leaned forward, and the inspector delivered the final blow. "Effective immediately, you are suspended from all HOA duties pending investigation." Mark's scream pierced the frozen air. "No." He collapsed fully onto his stomach, massive belly flattening against the icy ground, pink shirt suctioned to him like a second skin, steam rising from his overheated body as he pounded the pavement with his fists. "You can't take the HOA away from me. I am the HOA." The police officer exchanged a look with the inspector. "Sir," the officer said, "if you place barricades on anyone else's property again, you will be cited for obstruction." Mark let out a noise like a deflating balloon. Meanwhile, the reporter turned to me with a practiced smile. Care to make a closing statement for our viewers? I shrugged, looking straight into the camera. Yeah, I said, if your HOA ever tries to bully you, call someone they can't bully back. Behind me, Mark Rudd, an American white male in his 50s, extremely overweight, always sweating, wearing a tight bright pink dress shirt stretched over his large belly and black dress pants, let out another anguished sob, puddles forming beneath him as melting frost and sweat combined into one pathetic mixture. The cameraman caught everything. By the time the news van left, neighbors had dispersed, laughing, shaking their heads, patting me on the shoulder. The officer removed the barricades. The county inspector handed me documentation for the investigation, and I finally stepped into my truck, engine humming softly under the bright winter sun, the driveway completely clear again. As I backed out, I glanced once more at Mark, still face down, still sobbing, still steaming. And for the first time all day, I allowed myself a small smile. Because this time, the HOA wasn't the one in control.